network with motivation and inspiration and integrity, because the relationships that you make, regardless of if they fulfill an immediate need, will be invaluable to you later in life. How you and I got connected was through Mike at Freefuse, who's the platform for this learning product. And because I have this professional relationship with Mike where he trusts me and whatever, he had no trouble at all in suggesting that I get in touch with you. If you can have 36 relationships like that, that's going to serve you a lot more than having 1 or 2 relationships. And so I think that what we do in conjunction with those relationships that are valuable in some way is a huge piece of our success.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups and 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, David Winkelman. And David started out as a fine art student, and then transitioned a little bit to more design, and then to environmental design. So kind of narrowed that down a bit, and then graduated with a degree in urban planning and design. Got a couple jobs in graphic design. Moved over to commercial printing for a while. Then did a career in general management for a period of time. Then wanted to move back more into working with ideas and creativity. Led to a business which is what he's doing today, and consulting with other businesses and helping them with creativity. And so with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, David.
Thank you, Devin. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, excited to have you on. So I just gave a much more condensed version of a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack a bit? So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started as a fine art student.
Oh, goodness. Well, I was doing crafts. I was doing a variety of things with my hands and things with materials and tools, and the skills of, working with earth flavors and fiber, ceramics, woodworking, jewelry, grinding stones, and metalsmithing. And that was a little too much of this, I wanted to be more interactive with people. And so it branched out, and that led to still working with ideas and creatively, but something pulled me more into mainstream business. And by that time, mainstream business isn't that interested in my creativity or creative ideas. They want you to be the conduit. The managers and the corporate executives, they want you to be the conduit of all the other flows that go on in business.
So so you started out in that, so you kind of wanted to stay in that creative realm, wanted to, or go down a bit of a different path. And so I think that led to you getting a degree in urban planning and design. Is that right?
Yeah, because when you're mostly concerned with technique, ideas are almost secondary. And I wanted ideas to be primary. I was doing general management in an auto body and painting company that had 9 locations. And so I was serving as the overall operations person in that company, solving problems, people problems, technical problems, customer problems. Mm-hmm. When I heard about a network of consultants through a friend, who this network were doing 6-day-long strategic planning workshops
Now, before we
And
get too far into it, because I think we're jumping towards, if I remember, our when we chatted a bit before the podcast, this is much more closer to the present day. So why don't we rewind and tell us a little bit, once you're coming out of college, where did your journey design? So I think it started more in graphic design, right?
yes, but in comparison, I guess as important as that was as an ingredient or as a building block, to me, those were just jobs. Those
Well,
didn't evolve
I'm not going
any
to let
further.
you get away with it, because we're talking about the journey, and everybody wants to just talk about their present day. So part of the podcast is walking through the journey, because a lot of times we look at it and say, hey, these are just jobs, or they're just stepping stones, and yet everybody has that that same or part of the journey to where they're having to figure things out and pivot and go along the way. So let's rewind a bit and tell us a little bit about the starting out your journey after college.
Well, what I graduated with from college was a general bachelor's degree, and I had specialized in urban planning. As an undergraduate, a bachelor's degree doesn't really go very far, because most people who are in urban planning are going on immediately to a master's or a PhD. And the cities generally, or the very, very large developers, are looking at candidates who have the advanced degrees. So it didn't take me long to figure out that I needed to do something, to generate a livelihood. And I wasn't that interested in going back into school. So because I had this crafting background and some very small degree of fine art, it's actually a funny story how I got my very, very first design in graphic arts, if you will. I called up the editor of a magazine. Now, at that time, that was, considerably before anything digital existed. So you were doing everything by hand on a drafting table. And some people remember the word paste up, and they literally had a career track called paste up artist. That was, of course, before cut and paste was a manual process. It wasn't 4 clicks on a keyboard. And so I call up the editor of this magazine and I said, I see you have an advertisement out there for a paste up artist. And he said, yeah, what can you do? And I said, well, I've never had any experience in paste up before. He says, well, okay, what kind of skills do you have? And I said, I can draw and ink a straight line. He said, okay, great. We need that. Why don't you come on in for an interview? Because it was something of a challenge to literally draw and ink a straight line that looked like it was done by a machine. So I got that job. That was probably a year. And I thought, no, I'm not going to make it very far just looking at a board and cutting and pasting manually. So I found another job as a more versatile, well-rounded graphic design paste up person. Worked for there a year. After that, I knew I'd had it. I don't even know if I lasted a year. It was probably more like 8 or 9 months. And I said, I got to get more mainstream with bigger ideas and working with people and get off of the boards. Again, back to the want ads and saw an opportunity as an estimator for a printing company. Went in for an interview there, got the job as an estimator, not knowing really anything about commercial printing or estimating. They trained me up in 2 or 3 weeks. And about 4 months, 5, 6 months later, the president of an internal subsidiary company within that large printing company, and I got to talking, and I loved what they were doing in this subsidiary company. They were designing, manufacturing, and printing really big, creative projects for all of the major hotels on the Las Vegas Strip. These were elaborate menus, right? And they would be printing what they called shells that had all the 4 color work and all the die cutting and all the laminating and the foiling and the embossing. I mean, they were really complex manufacturing processes going into one of these menus. And they needed somebody to coordinate all that on the inside, because we would be shipping things out to subcontractors and vendors, and they needed somebody to manage the flow of all the particles back and forth. So I took on that role. Actually, it was like for the general managership of this little subsidiary company. Incidentally, that little company was called Filet Menu. And my business card was a little assembled business card that looked like a menu that you could flip the pages. And it was very much in the style of the menu that we did for, I think, one of the menus at Caesar's Palace. So it was very clever, very creative. And these menus were quite innovative. I still have many of them today, because they wowed and they dazzled the corporate food and beverage directors at places like Caesar's and the MGM Grand and so forth. So they were, sufficiently large, creative, innovative, complex projects that it was very stimulating. And after a few years, I kind of got just tired, I guess you might say, of life inside commercial printing. And a friend's father, who ran a small conglomerate called Bell Industries, not the AT&T Bell, knew that I had production management experience. So he said, I really need a production manager for my in-house data processing team, which was like almost 20 people. He said, with all your production management experience, why don't you consider coming aboard in a completely different environment and helping to manage all these data processing people who they're all prima donnas, they all have a mind of their own, and they need some leadership and management. So I hopped that printing and graphic arts track over to this, sort of bigger business data processing center management track, and did that for a few years and had some really, really great lessons, primarily about communication and problem solving. And that led to my doing a management workshop for entrepreneurs, all about creative problem solving and communication, and really getting on the same page with people, learning the win-win philosophy. And that kind of turned my head around. That I felt was the kind of inspiration and center point that I was really looking for. So at that time, I also met a woman who was producing the workshop, who would later become my wife. She lived in San Diego. She was based in San Diego. And I decided I'm going to hang out my own shingle with all that I've learned in this mainstream data processing environment about problem solving and teamwork and communication. And my boss at the time, who ran that company, he really wasn't interested in that. He just wanted his problem solved, one by one, as the human help desk. And I said, well, we're not aligned anymore. We're not on the same page, because you don't really get it about what it means to establish a culture where you didn't continually solve the same problems. And if you want a culture that's based on buy-in and engagement and communication and people not resisting change so much, this is what you need to do. He wasn't interested in that. I thought, I'm going to go to a different place where there's this whole network of people doing this work. I moved to San Diego, and that's when I hung out my shingle as a communications and problem solving, teamwork building consultant.
So now you say, okay, and it sounds like a fun journey to kind of get to, land to, hey, I'm going to hang out my own shingle. I'm going to go my own way and see if it works. Now, sometimes when you go, or you have a good idea, you go to start your own business, you hang out your own shingle, and it doesn't go as according to plan. Sometimes it goes better, sometimes it goes about how you go, or how you plan. So once you hung out your own shingle, how did things go?
Not very well. I had a lot of problems in selling myself. I did get one client that wanted basically to bring me on as kind of a full-time in-house transformational change agent. And I did that solidly for a year. So I shouldn't say it didn't go very well, but after that year, and I learned a ton doing that, and that was fun. It was dynamic. It was just what I wanted, but I think we hit a recession or something like that. I forget now, that, in San Diego. And that's when sort of business dried up. And I thought, my goodness, I better figure out what to do. And what I realized was that I really didn't have solid selling skills. I didn't know really what I was doing, and I didn't have the confidence to sell myself as a change agent, as a consultant, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, okay, I need to develop some sales and marketing skills. And I was literally dropping off, or maybe I think I was doing an email campaign. I was sending out a brochure to a lot of people. And somebody called, they got this brochure, and they said, they looked at my face, they looked at my name, and they said, by chance, are you connected to the Winkelman family back in Detroit? Because I came from Detroit. I knew this guy named Stuart Winkelman. I said, yeah, that was my father. So this guy says, oh my God, look at what you're doing. I need some salespeople. Why don't you come in for an interview? And he happened to be the head of an advertising specialty company. Well, everybody knows what advertising specialty companies do. And so that seemed like a good way to get some sales and marketing experience. So I went to work for him, doing essentially cold calling based full commission sales, which also involved the same sort of manufacturing processes that I was doing at the printing company several years before. So I thought, okay, you have to have ideas, you have to work on the fly, you have to work with people about how to take these tools, these products, and turn them into, viable and exciting advertising campaigns. I'll give that a try. And that was beginning to work out pretty well. I established a clientele that I did all on my own. And one of those clients ran this auto body and painting company that I mentioned earlier. And I went to work for him and rapidly became his vice president of marketing and operations, because he really didn't have a management infrastructure. And with all my background, or what I had as a background in management and problem solving and communication, that seemed to be a fit. He needed somebody to do marketing as well. So it was a very all-around job that I could do a lot of innovating with. And I worked for him for 7 years, really having no feel myself of what automotive was like. My interest wasn't cars. It was people and organizations and problem solving and team building and so forth. So that was a very dynamic, exciting opportunity, and very formative for me, organizationally speaking, especially because it was a challenge. I mean, the auto body and painting industry is not a glamour industry. It is sometimes referred to as a black hole industry, meaning who wants to go there, right? Who wants to have their car in the shop, especially for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at a time, when you're almost certain your car's not going to come back as it was. So you're dealing with a lot of chips on shoulders, and suspicion and skepticism, and plus you're fighting and arguing, battling with the insurance company the whole time. So it has its challenges, and that was great for about 5 years. then that kind of got a little bit old because I thought to myself, I'm not branching out. I'm not really growing at this point. I'm not meeting new people. I'm not cross-pollinating with other industries. That can't be good. And that's when I picked up on this other work that I started to tell you about a few minutes ago with a friend of mine who worked for this network of business consultants.
Hmm.
That's where you kind of turned me around and said, let's go back a bit.
No, that was a helpful walkthrough and great to capture the journey that led up to this. So walk us through. So now you get into the group with the business consultants, you start to explore that opportunity and find maybe that's the direction or path that's right for you. So walk us through a little bit of how that went and what you did and bring us up to where you're at today.
Well, Devin, that was really an extraordinary experience, as probably anybody who was involved at the time would tell you. The people that I went to work with, Matt and Gail Taylor, MG Taylor, was a very small company that in its core formation was maybe 5 people, but they enrolled people like me literally from all over the country who were creative and innovative and wanted to make a difference and were willing to do whatever to contribute to a group effort, a synergistic group effort. And so they developed what was called a way of working. Sometimes it was referred to as a technology, but again, it's largely pre-digital, and it was largely not high tech. We were just on the cusp of high tech, but this way of working, which involved bringing a client's team of, say, 40 to 80 people into a space, a very highly designed and built out and well-developed space, where everything in and about that space was designed to enable people to collaborate creatively and very intensively with each other. All the barriers to creative collaboration were removed in this environment. Social barriers, emotional barriers, physical barriers, and the promise to those huge clients that could afford to do this form of problem solving, where they could afford to bring in 40 to 80 of their key influencers and spheres of leadership. Those weeks cost those clients between $300,000 and $400,000. But those clients, HP and Ford Motor and Genentech and all your household big names, were in the process of launching billion-dollar initiatives. And they couldn't afford for those billion-dollar initiatives to be derailed or to die from lack of engagement or lack of thorough planning. So they said, yeah, if we know for certain, if we can basically buy this insurance policy where we can bring in all of our own people and have them sequestered and have them very intensively and rigorously work on this plan, but not just the strategic plan itself, but to build the engagement and to build the buy-in so that we know that this change process will happen. That was worth it to them. And that's what we were working on. And to be a part of those very, very dynamic change processes was pretty awesome, to be honest. And we learned all kinds of techniques for getting people on the same page faster and getting them engaged in a co-creation process where when people walked out 3 days later, they felt like they had wings on and they didn't want to go back to the regular, conventional, politic intensive way of working, because politics were just pushed out of the way completely. The typical hierarchies and communication barriers, this way of working in this process, which was fully adopted by Ernst & Young as its sort of bleeding edge way of bringing in their clients to do more in those 3 days, the staff, the facilitative staff came in a day and a half ahead of time. They stayed a day and a half later, but the client was there for 3 days. And in those 3 days, they were in the room, not going out for meals. If they took breaks in little small teams. And they got 12 and 14 and 12-hour days out of these clients. And when you're that focused, you can do 6 to 9 months worth of work in 3 days. If you've got the right people in the room, you got the right tools, you got the right direction and process. It's incredible what people who are that focused and that aligned can do. And so that was formative for everyone there. And I think all the people who've worked there over time in that environment have taken that methodology and that way of working, and they have infused that in anything they've done. And so that really, kind of has led me to understand how to then apply those principles and some of those skills and tools to almost any work situation that I'm in.
So with that all in mind, catch us kind of up, where's the business at today, and kind of, are you guys exploding, lots of clients, solo business, 1,000 employees, hockey stick growth, almost on bankruptcy, any or all the above? Kind of walk us through where it's at today.
Well, I wish I could tell you it was all that, and maybe we're on the cusp of that. Wouldn't that be swell? But I'm not particularly interested in having 1,000 employees. But hey, 1,000 clients in one way or another, leveraged, properly distributing the work, I'll take that. I'm happy to be the kind of influencer that can lead to that sort of movement, if you will. And so I've had several gigs as a long-term manager since those heady days working in that particular strategic planning environment. I've had some long-term gigs, and I've been, on the roller coaster ride of being an independent consultant. Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had been working as an in-house full-time employee doing change management. I was part of a 3-person team inside of a 35-person HR division of a company that had 10,000 people. I was beginning to roll out a performance management program, and the company started to position itself for sale. They were owned and managed by a venture capital firm. They lopped off the top 25% of their corporate HR department. Boom, gone. And I was the newcomer on the block, so I was gone. And having these skills from this strategic planning milieu that I was discussing, one of those skills was being a visualizer, was being able to stand at a whiteboard, hear what people are saying around me or behind me, whether that was in a panel discussion or a keynote speech or just a group of people talking, whatever it was. And I was able to take in the words, take in the discussion, take in the essence of what people were saying, and translate that into a whiteboard tapestry that was not just their words. So it wasn't transcripting per se. It was converting the words to something more visual, far more visual, that was far more
So now
visually
I'm
engaged.
going to circle back just to my question, because we're starting to run towards the end of the podcast. I want to make sure we catch to the final journey. So
Okay.
catch us up, kind of where's the business at today, or kind of, what, or how's it currently going, and kind of where's it headed?
Well, how many minutes do I have? Because I'll
probably not enough. We try and keep this to about 30 minutes, and we're coming up on that.
Okay. I met a guy who lived in Central Europe. We created, completely without meeting each other, with having no legal ties or economic ties, we just overlapped in terms of our passions, because he had created a software platform principally for teachers to do work using digital tools that was visual. Okay, so visual thinking on digital tools. We created a 4.5-hour training. That wasn't even a training course. It was like an exploration And then I was wondering at the end of that process, which lasted 18 months during the pandemic, what are we going to do with this? So to make a long story short, I have finally teamed up with another company called Freefuse. And Freefuse is putting this 4.5 hour course into their learning platform to turn it into micro lessons. And 2 days ago on Wednesday, I did my very first webinar hosted by Freefuse to sort of introduce to the world this way of working, which isn't really new, but not that many people are using it or harnessing it, shall we say. And it's 3 forms of literacy that all of us have, but they're 3 isolated or separate ways of working. We have digital literacy, which is the ability to use our computers and our phones and our tablets. We have visual literacy, which we just started developing at birth, right? We opened our eyes and we started becoming visually literate, understanding what patterns were and facial expressions and body language. And that just happens in life. You don't have to go to school for that. But the third kind of literacy, which is linguistic literacy, which is how we work with words. Well, we go to school for that for 15 plus years. We first learned it at home speaking, and then we learned to read, and then we learned to write. What does it look like when you combine digital literacy, visual literacy, which is native?
So we are getting towards the end of the podcast, and I do want to get, I'm going to nail you down as an attorney tries to do, which is, where's the business at today?
Well, we're looking to provide coaching and training and consulting expertise to companies and to teams that want to empower its people with digital visual literacy, with the ability to communicate more effectively, collaborate more effectively, and thus to be far more productive because they're using the native language that we have, which is visual thinking, to be on the same page more than not. And so that's the offering right now. And I, brought that out in this introductory webinar a couple of days ago. And so far the response has been really terrific.
Awesome. Well, definitely glad to hear that you guys are able to navigate, kind of find the spot that works for you, and then gaining traction along the way. So, well, now as we've caught up to the present day of the journey, great time to transition to the 2 questions always asked at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Well, there were some mistakes I made that I learned a lot from. I remember the big mistake at the commercial printing company was just not catching something that I should have caught. And that's really logistical or task oriented. But on the strategic kind of mistake, I didn't realize what I was sacrificing when I went to work as a general manager inside of a great mortgage company. And what I sacrificed was my networking, my outreach, my cross-pollination, because I was so focused on what I was doing there in that environment, and I was comfortable. And I didn't realize that comfortable situations don't remain forever. And you have to get yourself beyond and projected out in the world with a network of people who can help you in the future, that you could contribute to in the future. And I didn't realize that at the time. And so those years ticked by, and I didn't do that.
No, I think that's a great mistake to learn from, and be able to maintain that network and otherwise continue to grow and expand. Definitely can have an impact. So a good mistake to learn from. Second question now that I always ask is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Network with motivation and inspiration and integrity, because the relationships that you make, regardless of if they fulfill an immediate need, will be invaluable to you later in life. How you and I got connected was through Mike at Freefuse, who's the platform for my for this learning product. And because I have this professional relationship with Mike where he trusts me and whatever, he had no trouble at all in suggesting that I get in touch with you. If you can have 36 relationships like that, that's going to serve you a lot more than having 1 or 2 relationships. And so I think that what we do in conjunction with those relationships that are valuable in some way is a huge piece of our success, because those people are watching out for you. They're giving you advice. You never know when someone else's perspective is or a connection is really going to help. I mean, I'm certain I can give you some other tips or learnings, but that for me is profound. And how I found my way to Mike was through a networking connection.
No, I think that definitely is a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. So, well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Well, they can certainly look me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm doing an awful lot of exchange and communication and meeting people. David, David Winkelman, Winkelman on LinkedIn. That's a pretty direct route. It's David B. Wink at gmail.com or David at Winkelman Solutions with an S. There's 3 ways right there.
Awesome. Well, definitely some great ways to reach out, connect, and otherwise support a great business. So great. Well, now as we wrap up the episode, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses along their journey to success. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, David, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. Hope everybody got some kind of lick of the ice cream cone.